Yo, what's up, guys? Welcome to the Stokastic MLB Deeper Dive presented by Odd Chapter. Got a nice little 9-game slate of some MLB DFS tonight and some big prizes up for grabs. So I'm looking forward to extracting as much knowledge as we can get from our man, Shit My Money DFS, for how we can take these down. Adam, how you doing, man?
Doing pretty well. Looking forward to another baseball slate. It's been a rough stretch for me, so always enjoy getting on to the next one.
I know, yeah. Yesterday was had, like I thought I was gonna win all this money, and then all of a sudden, like Shohei Otani goes like nuclear, and I'm like, damn it! So it's cool to like kind of get a taste of it, but like, yeah, it's like the crazy thing about MLB DFS or any DFS. I don't know if you read like the new strategy guide, but like even if you're like the most sick player, like and entering a ton of lineups, like your chance of winning like this large field tournament on DK or FanDuel is like maybe like once every couple months if you're like the best player. So rough stretches happen. It's all about following the process. We'll figure out how to tackle tonight's slate. Before we get going, guys, if you could hit the like button and subscribe, that gives us that positive feedback that me and Adam need to give some good takes. We also have some free content on the site today, MLB top stacks and PGA ownership projections for travelers. Top stacks, that'll be pretty cool because we can kind of go through that throughout the show and tell you guys how me and Adam use this information, which I think is pretty key to winning at these MLB DFS tournaments. So let's let's get into tonight's games. First, we got Washington at Baltimore. Washington 145 dog. Patrick Corbin versus Tyler Wells. It looks like as far as pitching, not seeing a ton here tonight, that's for sure. How are you breaking down this pitching matchup between Corbin and Wells?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's much to see here from a pitching standpoint. Wells has been bad this year, 15% strikeout percentage, 4.71 xFIP. Corbin hasn't been much better, 17% strikeout percentage, 4.36 xFIP for him. This is also a slate where there's some very underpriced pitching that is certainly a lot more appealing than guys like Tyler Wells or Patrick Corbin.
Yeah, agreed. So, yeah, both of these guys in the teens in strikeout percentage, so definitely not too exciting. The conditions in Camden Yards tonight, not like that much swinging things in favor of bats or pitching. I'd say 70 degrees, 90% humidity, maybe a slight lean towards bats with that kind of humidity. So over under 9, nothing too crazy, but what are you looking at from bats in this game?
Yeah, I mean, I'm certainly interested in the bats here just because neither pitcher is particularly good. You do have ownership coming in, particularly to Baltimore right now, projected to be the second highest owned team in the aggregate on DraftKings, but also the second best chance of being the top value stack. The O's lineup is solid. I mean, 1 through 5, they have good hitters with Hayes, Mancini, Santander, Mountcastle, Rutschman. No Cedric Mullins in the lineup today. The bottom of the order certainly leaves something to be desired, but that 1 through 5 is solid, is good. It's 5 right-handed power bats taking on Corbin, so I like that. On the Nat side, I'm kind of surprised that they're not getting a little bit more ownership here against Wells. So I do like getting to them. Juan Soto I think really stands out as a top option, but Josh Bell looks very good at that price tag. Nelson Cruz, Luis Garcia, it's a good spot for the Nats. So ownership wise, I do think, and we have them projected to be a little bit under owned here.
Nice. Yeah, so one of the things I'm seeing in tonight's game in Baltimore is there is like a little bit of a chance of precipitation where if you Google it, it's saying 99% chance of rain by 9 p.m. Another thing I like to look at is dark sky. It's saying light rain throughout the night, starting around 6 or 7 p.m. So does that scare you off this game a little bit?
Not too much. Right now, at least, I think that it's likely that it gets in. I think it's the only game on the slate that has like any concerns whatsoever. But for now, I'm treating it as if it's going to go.
Okay. Yeah, I think this will be one to look out for. So maybe we can circle back towards the end of the show where we have the most up to date data. But like I'm looking at the future radar here, and it does look like kind of ominous. Like these things aren't super accurate, but like it could start raining around 8-9 p.m. and then the game could be over. So I want to add on our projections a little bit of a postponement risk. I've been kind of like using this as like uh, postponed slash suspended, because it seemed like, I don't know, like what it seems like this year is that because suspended games do count, and it's like the old rule is if it didn't go 5 innings, you just toss it out, you start the game completely fresh the next game. So I created this incentive for teams to not play at all. But nowadays the rule is that like no matter where the game gets suspended, you just pick up where you left off the next game. So I feel like we've been seeing more suspended games. Although this one, it probably lasts long enough before rains to get called one way or the other. So I'm a little bit worried, like, because if you pick bats from this game and you get 6 innings, that really hurts.
Yeah.
Am I scaring you off this game at all?
No, no. I mean, I feel pretty good about it right now.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm having some second thoughts. Let's look at the lineups here though. So, Baltimore, like it seems like they got some up and coming players on the team, like Adley Rushman. He hasn't really been hitting well so far in the majors. He's kind of cheap, but he does fit that catcher position, which is always a little bit tougher to fill. So, is there any names in particular that are jumping out to you on the Orioles, and what do you make of Adley Rushman so far?
Yeah, I mean, 1 through 5, I think is where like I'm the most confident. These are all 5, good hitters. Then you move down the order. Tyler Nevin has some power. Jorge Mateo has some speed, but 6 through 9 is certainly a lot weaker in this lineup than 1 through 5 is. But as far as Rutschman goes, I do like him quite a bit. I think he has run into some bad luck as far as a hitter, as far as hitting goes. Certainly off to a slow start, like you said, in terms of his actual production. But he's had a lot of hard hit balls, especially recently. I'm actually expecting him to kind of break out and go through a hot streak sooner rather than later. And at 3,400 at the catcher position, he's a very high upside player.
Definitely. One of the things that we always like to talk about is BABIP. His BABIP so far in his major league career is only 25%, which means whenever he hits the ball and it goes in play, it's only turning into a hit 25% of the time, which is like extremely low compared to it's like quite low compared to the league average of 29%. So it kind of backs up what you're saying, where he is getting quite unlucky so far. Now on the Orioles, or sorry, the Nationals side, they have quite a few like strong hitters at the top of the lineup. Is there anyone in particular that's catching your fancy here?
Yes, I mean Soto is the one that, of course, jumps off the page. He's having a somewhat slow season by his standards, but his expected numbers are also much better than his actual numbers. 433 expected WOBA, 334 expected ISO against right-handed pitching so far. Tyler Wells doesn't really strike guys out from either side of the plate. 165 expected ISO to lefties, 221 to righties. So Soto's the one that really stands out, of course, clearly the best hitter on the team. He's also leading the way at 10% ownership. Nelson Cruz at 3,600, Josh Bell at 3,500 are bats I really like as well.
Nice. All right. Thanks, Greg, for the super chat. He says, been on a heater since your article, Alex. Thanks for reading that. Had a nice lead in first in the hot corner until that Angels finish. Like, you're not the only one. I saw our boy Steve Buzzard was winning 100K. I was like, I went to bed. I'm like, Steve's definitely going to win 100K. I'm gonna like send him a message tomorrow morning. And then I wake up and I'm like, damn, this whole like slate changed after I fell asleep. So that was some bad beats all around the board last night, unfortunately. Favorite contrarian pitchers on DK. Do you have any pitchers so far that you think are going a little bit under-owned?
So I think pitching on DK is kind of tough because you have a couple that are just so underpriced and also going to be really popular, namely Shohei Otani, but also George Kirby. But I think that if you're looking for lower owned guys, guys that are going a little bit under owned, looking to Charlie Morton, looking to Tarek Skubal, those are guys that kind of stand out to me where they have difficult matchups. They're not nearly as underpriced as guys like Otani, but they're still very, very good pitchers that just aren't pulling nearly as much ownership.
Definitely. I think uh, going contrarian at pitcher isn't something I'm always like trying to do, but yeah, I like those that you called out there. Let's see. It looks like Show Otani and Kirby are really killer values tonight, so that is going to make it a little bit tough to pivot. But one of the things that you might have seen in the strategy guide, Gray, is we have all the pictures kind of laid out with the ownership and the projection. So that's kind of my reference to look at. So I'm pulling this up here. Okay, so going Morton and Skubal, I think you called it. Eric Lauer is like a little bit too expensive to really justify, I think. Wainwright, Waka. I think you could go to Daniel Lynch. Like the problem is just like trying to figure out how to spend all the salary, because it feels like the bats recently have been like kind of cheap. So like it's not like you can just pick a 6 stack and spend all your excess salary these days. Have you
Yeah, I
noticed?
do think I mentioned it on the show this morning. This just kind of strikes me as a slate where I wouldn't be surprised if I end up just naturally leaving a little bit more money on the table than normal. Not even like not intentionally, like not going in with that strategy, but just the fact that Otani is $2,000 less than he should be. Kirby is probably $2,000 less than he should be, and you have a bunch of cheap bats. I'm not gonna like force George Kirby to become Eric Lauer or something just because I have salary left over. So I do think the pricing today is just particularly soft.
Nice. Yeah, that's kind of what I've been noticing, where it does make it tougher to go to some of the lower price pitchers. So all right, let's let's go to the next game, which is Chicago at Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh, it seems like like all season long they were like never rostered, and then the last couple of days they're like super chalk, and that was kind of surprising. But today again in Pittsburgh, 83 degrees, 74% humidity. That feels like some favorable conditions for hitters. Is this a day where you might go back to Pittsburgh?
Yeah, some not very good pitching here as well. Pittsburgh has O'Neal Cruz leading off. He had been batting sixth in his last couple of games, so that's a nice lineup bump for him. His salary went from 2K to 2,700, so still wildly underpriced. Looks like a very, very good value option at shortstop. He did lose outfield eligibility as well, so that will, knock down how easy it is to get him into lineups, but still looks like a really good value if you need it. Brian Reynolds at 4,200, Dan Vogelbach at 2,700 stand out as well. Keegan Thompson's been decent this year. 25.6% strikeout percentage to lefties, only 18.7% to righties, 212 expected ISO to righties, 123 to lefties. So I'm not like enamored with Pittsburgh as a stack, but individually, I do really like O'Neal Cruz, and then I'm interested in guys like Reynolds and Vogelbach as well.
Nice. Yeah, O'Neal Cruz seems like he's just like dominating so far. He's only 2,700 and leading off with the favorable platoon split. So he seems like a no-brainer cash play and a good GPP play. And then we got the stack. Okay, so 5% chance of being the top stack, 12% owned. If you go to this new cheat sheet I'm making, and also the top stacks page, we kind of sort everything with the stack score. So let me know what you guys think of that. But they're 5th highest on the board. It does look like Chicago on the other side, and Baltimore like super cheap and just projected a little bit higher. But how favorable are you towards Pittsburgh, knowing they're going to be pretty high on today?
Yeah, for Pittsburgh, it's more so just those individual guys for me. I think from a stacking standpoint, the Cubs seem to be in a better spot and just have a little bit more appealing lineup. That being said, they're also getting a lot more ownership here, basically projected for twice the aggregate ownership as their top stack percentage, but they also have a very good chance of being the top value. This is just another team that is extremely cheap. But one thing to keep in mind on this slate in particular, when you're talking about the top value stacks, is that because the pitching is mispriced, you're not necessarily going to be like starving for value amongst hitters. So the fact that they have, a little bit better point per dollar projections isn't quite as important as it would be on other slates.
Definitely, yeah. The points per dollar does look pretty crazy across the board on Chicago. So let's look at those guys. The only guy that's expensive is Wilson Contreras at 4,800. Everyone else is dirt cheap. You got the team total at 5.3, and I don't know like if this really like plays into ownership or not. Probably not, but like I feel like the Cubs just aren't that good this year so far, and like maybe people aren't as high on them as they should be tonight, given the Vegas odds. But I think people are pretty smart these days, so we do have them as our top stack on the board by quite a bit. And like with that in mind, like, are you still going to be stacking them a lot, or how? If you do pick them, like, how are you going to get different?
Yeah, I think there's a good chance that I end up getting to the Cubs more so in cash than I do in tournaments, because of the ownership. Like even looking at the individual ownership, which is something that I think is really important, in addition to looking at the aggregate ownership, you have Wilson Contreras leading the way at 33%, but Haps at 25%, VR's at 23%, Wisdom's at 21%. There's only 2 hitters on the team sub 10%. So if you go to 5 of those guys, it's just going to be really difficult to have a contrarian lineup because half of your lineup is going to guys that are extremely popular. So normally for me, when there are teams like this that are really good values, but that are also really popular, I just end up not getting as much as the field because I'm using them more as mini stacks and one-offs in lineups that are otherwise contrarian than I am like jamming them all into the same lineup. So I do think that they're very good plays in the sense that it's a good matchup and they're very reasonably priced, but the ownership's a little bit higher than I would like.
Yeah, definitely. It's almost twice as high as any other team. And what I'm seeing in the top stack tool, which is free today, so make sure to drop by. I'll drop a link in the chat so you can look at what we're looking at. But what I'm seeing is like most of the teams today have a pretty decent chance of being the top stack. So like aside from Kansas City, Oakland, Tampa Bay, every team is 4% or higher. So that like the Detroit Tigers, even though like they're not a very good team, like still have a little bit less than 50% chance of the Cubs of being the top stack. So this is a spot where I feel like you can take the field against a team that's like incredibly popular in the Cubs and get an advantage. I'm not saying I won't end up with the Cubs at all, but it's like now I'm like worried that if I make my lineups, I'm gonna have like a lot of Cubs in them. But I don't know if that ever happens to you, but it does seem like this is like a quintessential example where like they're a little bit more likely to be the best scoring team, but the ownership's like much higher. So like, would you rather if you're single entering like stack the Cubs, or would you rather take the field? I guess.
Yeah, I'd rather just be going to a different team. It's just a situation where you're going to get very, very good projected lineups if you go to the Cubs, but you really just need to think in terms of payoffs and how much money can you make if your team does well. Because even though the Cubs do have the top stack percentage, you're still talking about 90% of the time that they're not going to be the top scoring stack, and it's just going to be easier to get a good payday if you happen to be on one of these lower owned teams that does well. That, like you said, even though they're less likely than the Cubs, most of them are still at least within the same range.
Definitely. Any interest in the pitchers in this game, Zach Thompson or Keegan Thompson? Battle of the Thompsons.
Yeah, I mean, not particularly. If I went to one, I would go to Thompson, I guess. 21.4% strikeout percentage is more appealing than what I expect to see from Jared Eikoff, who is making his first major league start of the season. Eikoff pitched in 13 games at AAA this year, 6 starts, 23.5% strikeout percentage. But overall, I don't really see any reason to be excited about either pitcher.
Oh, okay, Jared Eikoff. For some reason, I had it in Zach Thompson in this, so I'm not really sure where that came from. All right, let me fix that. Jared Eikoff starting for Pittsburgh. All right, so let's go on to the next game. New York at Tampa Bay. Tampa's kind of a pitcher's park, so you got an awesome team like the Yankees going there. And facing Shane Baz. Shane Baz hasn't pitched a ton in the major leagues. It looks like a total of 20 innings so far. Do you have any sort of inclination of if this is a good matchup for the Yankees, bad matchup? What are you thinking?
Yeah, one of the best pitching prospects in baseball. He was part of the Chris Archer trade that brought Austin Meadows and Tyler Glasnow to Tampa Bay as well. 5 major league starts for him in his career, 3 last year, 2 this year. 32.9% strikeout percentage in those starts so far. At AAA this year, he pitched 13 innings, 4 starts, 37.7% strikeout percentage. Last year at AAA in 46 innings, he struck out 36%. He's one of the best pitching prospects in baseball. Doesn't strike me as a good matchup for the Yankees. That doesn't mean you can't go to them, because anytime the Yankees are not going to pull much ownership, they do become an appealing team in tournaments just because there is so much power in their lineup. But certainly not a pitcher that I'm excited to be taking bats against.
Definitely, yeah, and it looks like Vegas is in agreement with that. With the Yankees only have a 4.3 team total, which is quite low for how talented their team is. So that being said, the Yankees are a pretty talented team. Would you consider Shane Baz in tournaments?
I do have a little bit of interest there because the 8K price tag is reasonable. The biggest concern that the second biggest concern, the biggest concern I have is that he's facing the Yankees. The second biggest concern is that he did only throw 76 pitches last time out, but he got through 6 innings there. So one thing that I typically think when you see that is that it probably wasn't like a hard, 75, 76 pitch count for him. It was probably more so that he got through 6 innings and was done. That makes me think that he probably can at least throw into the mid 80s here if he needs to. So at 3 or 4% ownership, I think he's one of those pitchers where in an individual tournament lineup, if you need to save some ownership, he does make sense as a contrarian play. There is certainly a very high ceiling for him given his strikeout stuff, but it's still going to be difficult to prioritize him overall because he just doesn't look nearly as good as guys like Otani or George Kirby at their respective salaries.
Agreed. Yeah, the price tag of 8K on DraftKings, 7,200 on FanDuel, not particularly favorable. And I think the pitch count is a concern. Like, as you said, he has 5 starts. He's only pitched 20 innings in 2/3 in his major league career. So I'm a little bit worried. Like, I think there's a lot of upside if you pick Shane Baz, and he's only 5% owned on DraftKings, 1% on FanDuel. So I think he could be like, if you feel like living dangerously, like that's not the worst option. However, Jordan Montgomery on the other side of this game, he's like one of the top pitchers of the night, it looks like. I guess it's mostly because of the matchup versus Tampa Bay and the park, because his strikeout numbers aren't anything to blow you away. So what are you seeing with Jordan Montgomery?
Yeah, it's just a cheap price tag on Montgomery. A pretty good overall pitcher, a good park, like you said. I'm also surprised by his strikeout numbers this year, and I still think you're going to see them go up. The reason being that he's taken a really big step back in terms of strikeout numbers this year from where he was in previous seasons. 24.5% strikeout percentage last year and the year before, 26 in 2019. Only a 19.5% strikeout percentage this year. The walks are down, still a 3.6 xFIP. But looking at his plate discipline numbers, which I think sometimes there's a tendency for people to sort of overstate those. Strikeout percentage is typically more predictive of future strikeout percentage than plate discipline numbers. But the reason I mentioned them with Montgomery is that when you see a pitcher whose strikeout percentage has dropped off like Montgomery's has and his walk percentage has come down, I think one fair assumption is that he's just pitching differently. He's, kind of pitching the contact more, working in the strike zone more. But when you look at the plate discipline numbers, normally, if it's a change in approach, you would see that reflected in the swinging strike percentage or the called strike plus swinging strike percentage and chase percentage on pitches out of the zone. His chase percentage on pitches out of the strike zone is higher than his career average this year. His called strike plus swinging strike percentage is higher than his career average. His swinging strike percentage is higher than his career average. His percentage of pitches thrown in the strike zone is actually lower than his career average. So I still think that there's a chance that kind of rest of season from this point forward, you actually see strikeouts increase for Jordan Montgomery.
That definitely makes sense. And I think that's what we're projecting as well, like in the model, that like he's been at 19% so far this year, but we have him at 22%.
Yeah.
So like that'd be league average. And league average is enough to get it done when you're in a favorable matchup in a favorable park. So I think that he's quite underpriced on DraftKings. FanDuel at 9,100. That's a little bit tougher. Any thoughts on FanDuel?
Um, I like it. So I still like him on FanDuel, but it's kind of just for different reasons. Like on DraftKings, he looks good and he's getting a lot of ownership because he's so cheap. On FanDuel, he's more of a contrarian option. You're getting basically a third of the field rostering Otani. You're getting 17% going to Carlos Rodon. So it makes Jordan Montgomery's ownership come down a bit. We still have him with the fourth highest chance of being the top scoring pitcher on the slate. So at only 9% ownership, he's more difficult to get to, but he's a nice way to be contrarian on FanDuel. Whereas on DraftKings, he's just one of the best projected options.
Nice. Now, when it comes to the bats in this game, like the Yankees, it seems like they're expensive and not in a great park or a great matchup. So they're definitely a stack that's not popping up like they normally would. Is it one you're willing to take a chance on today, or are you just looking at more favorably priced teams?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure how much I'll actually get to because there are certainly some other pretty low owned teams that look good as well. But I'm really just never going to be upset if I'm getting to the Yankees at low ownership because they just have so much power in their lineup. Aaron Judge projected for 10% ownership on DraftKings. No other hitter on the Yankees is above 5%. So you're getting the best offense in baseball at very low ownership. The reason the ownership is so low is the difficult park and the difficult matchup against Shane Baz. But this is still a pitcher that has 5 major league starts. There's still a lot of uncertainty here. Certainly some volatility in young pitchers when they are kind of getting their feet wet in the big leagues. So I still like the Yankees at low ownership. It's just a matter of, am I able to get to them, or do I go to some of these other teams that are in a little bit more favorable matchup and still not pulling much ownership?
Yeah, I think that their team, I might look a different direction tonight just because they're expensive. Like the top stack percent is just kind of average, and they're not pulling much ownership, which is good, but they're also the bottom third, or sorry, they're third from the bottom in our stack score. So that, like, usually I'm just kind of crossing off the bottom names on the list. Like sometimes with a team like the Yankees, it's like they're so low owned that you just take some shots anyway. But I don't know if I see it tonight. Thanks, my fellow Arc, for the super chat. Says it's cool there are new DFS channels, but you guys should do your own style instead of copying Osmo. Nice. All right. What about the Rays? Any interest in the Rays?
Pretty difficult for me to get there. I think the lineup's watered down a little bit. You haven't had Wander Franco for a while, and now you also don't have Manny Margot. You don't have Kevin Kiermaier, who's not a huge loss, but it just makes it a little bit difficult to really like much here. Plus, the park isn't conducive for power. The matchup against Jordan Montgomery is not very good. The only real case I could make for Tampa Bay if I had to would be that Montgomery is pulling a lot of ownership on DraftKings specifically. So anytime you can stack against a 25% owned pitcher, there's some merit to doing that. But I realistically don't think I'll be able to get too much Tampa.
Agreed. We actually okay, so let me tell you guys about what we got behind the paywall at Stokastic. So I know most of you guys it's probably not your first show or anything, but we actually have this new strategy guide. So one of the things that we're really solving for this season is I know a lot of people kind of may have tried it for a week, and some of the tools behind the paywall, you're not going to know how to use them right off the bat. So we came up with this strategy guide to help you guys come up with a really awesome strategy to win these big prizes on DraftKings and FanDuel. And the more I researched the contests, the more I realized that you don't have to do anything really crazy to win at these tournaments. You just have to play solid, and a big step of that is knowing how to leverage a couple of our tools. The top stacks tool is the place I'm going to start when I'm building a lineup, and that's free today, so you guys can check it out for free. I'm going to link that strategy guide in the chat here, so you guys can check it out if it lets me. It's too many characters. Oh, here we go. Okay, so guys, if you haven't already read that, check that out. We also have promo going, which is sorry, I'm getting all disorganized. Swapping between these pages. All right, MLB Live, half off your first month of Stokastic Plus Platinum, which covers all of our sports. So that's just a way to get back in the game here and give these tools another try. And yeah, it had I came up with this new slogan for some of these tools: performance enhancing data. What do you think?
Yeah, I like it.
Thanks, man. All right, I think we just got all of the lineups for tonight, so that's pretty cool. Let's head to the next game. We got Detroit at Boston. Fenway is a pretty good batter's park, so we've been rostering a lot of Tigers recently, and I don't think it's gone particularly well, except was it Javi Baez that had a huge game yesterday, I think.
Yes, it was.
Yeah.
I opened like some random person had played me in a $500 head-to-head, and the first thing I see is they have Jordan Lyles, and I'm like, oh, cool, this should go well. And then the second thing I see is they have Javi Baez scoring like 30-something points right out of the gate.
Definitely, and that was crazy. And I saw you were tilting over Jordan Lyles. Someone played you in cash with him or something.
Yep. Yeah, got smoked.
Yeah. That happens. So the temperature in Boston is like down today at 65. The team total in this game is only 8. Like part of that's due to Tariq Skubal starting. I don't think Michael Wacha is really going to move the needle. Oh shoot. Okay. My cheat sheet here. I need a little bit of work. All right, Michael Wacha. Yeah, he's been about league average so far this season. It looks like not really a strikeout guy either. Do you have a lean here as far as pitchers, and what do you think about the conditions tonight?
Yeah, I mean, not great conditions for hitting. It's in the mid 60s, like you said, so you don't expect the ball to carry quite as much. As far as the pitching goes, I do actually have some interest. We talked about Skubal before. I think he's a good tournament play just because he is one of the more talented pitchers on the slate and he's not getting as much ownership. The reason he's not getting as much ownership is that he's more or less correctly priced, whereas you have guys like Otani and Kirby and Montgomery that are clearly underpriced. And then it's also a difficult matchup for Skubal. So if you're just running projections or playing, your top projected lineups, you're just not going to have an easy time getting to Skubal over those guys. And I'm not saying that you have to. I mean, those guys are clearly fantastic plays, and kind of like you alluded to earlier, I typically also don't get contrarian at pitcher as much as I do with bats, but you're still talking about a pitcher that has about a 27% strikeout percentage this year, a 3.02 xFIP, only a 4.7% walk percentage. He's allowing 0.6 home runs per 9. He's a very good pitcher and a top pitching prospect. It's not like he came out of nowhere. So at low ownership, I do have interest in Skubal. It's just a matter of, how much of him can I get to when these other guys are so underpriced and very good pitchers in their own right. And then on the other side with Wacha, it is a good matchup against the Tigers. Like you said, he's pretty much a league average pitcher. 17.4% strikeout percentage certainly leaves a lot to be desired. 4.2 xFIP is kind of just run of the mill. So it's somebody that I'm not going to be excited about getting to. Like, I would certainly rather just play George Kirby for $200 less. But if you need the ownership discount, at least it is a good matchup for Wacha.
Yeah, I'm kind of thinking Wacha is a reasonable play. Pretty low ownership, good points per dollar. The strikeouts, not not anything to get excited about. 17% of the year, but the Tigers lineup is about 10% higher than league average in that department. So he's someone that he's like a worse version of Jordan Montgomery tonight, where you're not expecting a ton of Ks, but all the other factors are working in his favor.
Yeah. Also, as far as Skubal goes, no Rafael Devers in the Red Sox lineup. They also have Jeter Downs in there, who is their 5th-ranked prospect, but Steamer projects for a 30.5% strikeout percentage. At AAA this year, he was striking out 31% of the time. Last year, he struck out 32% of the time. He is batting 9th, but that's a pretty nice strikeout bat that they've got in there.
Yeah, definitely. So Devers being out of the lineup is always going to be a huge factor. So Skubal already is a very solid player, and then taking out their best hitter, that's only icing on the cake. As far as bats here, like, it does look like, even though it's a little bit chilly in Boston tonight, that the pricing on these guys is pretty favorable, at least on the Detroit side. So what are you thinking you're going to do today with Detroit?
I do like the lack of ownership coming into Detroit. I also like that we have Riley Green hitting in the 2 hole. He had been hitting fifth, so a nice little lineup bump for him. He's one of the top prospects in baseball, only $2,100 still. So from a not even just a value standpoint, obviously 2,100, it's a good value, but from an upside standpoint too. Waka's allowed a 220 expected ISO, two lefties so far this year. I think Riley Green individually looks very good.
Nice. I did get a note in the chat that the top stacks weren't actually free. So I did fix that just now. So if you're trying to access that and you don't have the membership right now, just refresh. Yeah, Riley Green, he seems to be someone that's been winding up in a ton of my lineups, and he's only 2,100 tonight. So that seems like it could happen again today. And like the nice thing about today's slate is like I feel like before the Tigers were super chalky because like they were the best cheap stack, but today there is like a ton of cheap stacks that are really awesome. So the Tigers look let's see, they are they're fourth from the bottom in terms of the top stack percent, but it is 4%, which is significant. Only 3% owned, 14% chance of being the top value. So what we normally see is like when a team has a great chance of being the top value, they're like usually super high owned, and then that like doesn't work in your favor at all. Do you think that the Tigers tonight could be an exception to that rule?
Yeah, I'm always interested when you get one of the top value stacks at low ownership. The only thing that sort of it's a little bit less relevant tonight just because, again, of the pitching. You can spend $15,000 on pitching and get Shohei Otani and George Kirby and do whatever you want with bats. So the fact that they are a top value, I think, is just a little bit less important here.
That's a good point, that you can only take advantage of the value to get the expensive players. So all right, I just updated the projections with all the lineups, starting the ownership. So we should be able to start building our lineups pretty soon. I think the only lingering question is Baltimore. Like, are we gonna fade that game for weather or not? So I think we'll save the last couple minutes to talk about that. All right, on the Boston side, it looks like Rob Snyder is batting second, which is pretty surprising. He's super cheap. And then the heart of the order, pretty high price compared to their projections. So what are you doing with Boston tonight?
I think it's pretty tough to really like them. For one, you have a pretty weak lineup here relative to what they normally have. No Devers hurts. I mean, he's always one of the top third base options when he plays. Rob Snyder hitting second is just not a super appealing thing from a DFS standpoint. Tarek Skubal is also a very good pitcher. So, if you get to some JD Martinez, some Xander Bogaerts, I think that's fine. Trevor Story looks pretty good as well. But I think this is going to be one of the more difficult stacks for him to get to.
Agreed. All right, let's go to the next game. San Francisco at Atlanta. San Francisco this year been really solid as far as bats, and Atlanta reigning champs. Like some really good teams. The pitchers starting today are pretty solid with Morton versus Rodon. But even despite that, it seems like the team totals in this game of 4.5 for San Fran and 5 for Atlanta are still pretty high. So what do you make of this one?
I kind of just like all the aspects of this game in tournaments because Carlos Rodon is clearly one of the best pitchers on the slate. He has the second best strikeout percentage at 30.5%, only trailing Otani. He has a 3.21 xFIP. The Braves have one of the highest strikeout percentages in baseball, but they also have the highest ISO in baseball. So this is a spot where, if Carlos Rodon goes out there and does what he normally does, he's going to have a good game. He's going to carve up this lineup, just like he does most lineups, get a bunch of strikeouts. The bottom of this order is not particularly scary either. But if he's not on top of his game, the Braves are a team like the Yankees where I'm just always interested in them, even when they have difficult matchups, because kind of just like the right tail for them is so good. Like their ceiling is so high because there's so much power. So they're not getting much ownership here. They are projected to be a bit under owned. We have them with the fifth highest top stack percentage at about 7%, 6.5% ownership. So I think they make sense. I think Carlos Rodon makes sense. And then on the other side, we kind of had mentioned Charlie Morton as one of the better, somewhat contrarian pitching options. He has struggled a bit this year, particularly with left-handed power. He's allowed a 216 expected ISO to lefties, but he's still a good strikeout pitcher. He has struck out about 25.5% of hitters this year, 4.02 xFIP. Scary matchup against the Giants, but Morton isn't pulling that much ownership. We have him at 13% on DraftKings with a 17% chance of being a top 2 pitcher. But at the same time, the Giants, as a stack, only projected for 3% ownership with a 6% chance of being the top stack. This entire game just sort of strikes me as a situation where medium projections are kind of just pulling down everywhere because the pitchers have bad matchups and so do the hitters. But within one game, a lot of the time you're not going to get that 3-2, 4-3 outcome. You're going to get either the pitcher being bad and the offense being good, or the offense being bad and the pitcher being good.
Yeah, this does seem very peculiar with like the pitchers in a game with a high total being pretty high owned. Now the temperature in Atlanta today is extremely high. It looks like it's 97 degrees right now, and at game time it'll be like 95. So like my general intuition in these is that if a team gets past that starting pitcher like pretty quickly, like in 4 innings or whatever, and gets off to a decent start, then they're facing the back of the bullpen and there's huge upsides. So I do like this game for stacks because the top stack percentages are on the higher side, with both in the 6-ish percent, which is pretty good on today's slate. The ownership is low on the bats. And then like when it comes to the Braves, you're getting a lot of leverage over people who roster Carlos Rodon. So yeah, I agree. Like I don't mind the pitchers. It does seem like the stacks may be particularly appealing from a ownership standpoint today. Now the Giants are only playing 2.6% projected ownership in our DraftKings projections. So that seems especially low. What, do you have a preference between San Francisco and Atlanta?
Slight lean towards San Francisco just because they are getting a little bit less ownership and Morton's not as good as Carlos Rodon. I do also like the lineup the Giants are running out there. I mentioned it before, but Morton has struggled with left-handed power in particular this year. In the top 6, you have Jock Peterson, Luis Gonzalez, Brandon Belt, and Mike Yastrzemski. So they certainly do have some left-handed power bats in this lineup.
Nice. Yeah, I think the Giants are pretty appealing. Like I do feel like in a single entry lineup, I wouldn't mind like taking one of these 2 teams as my starting stack. So the temperature here, like I feel like a lot of people might miss that if they're just building off the app or something. So this does seem very appealing from my perspective. All right, let's talk about Odd Shopper. That's where you can get all of our sports bets, and it's all about finding a great bet and finding the best place to bet it. So if you go over there, we got a lot of MLB bets that we're working on. So like the strikeout props, like we're betting those every day. Like you may have seen Sean's 100K win screenshots from doing some sports betting on the strikeout prop round robins. So definitely have seen some good success with those. If you click the link in the video description below, you can get the access to it. It's actually free, so you just have to go on, log in with Google, and it's transforming all of our DFS projections into sports betting projections. So you're going to see some pretty good success with those bets. All right, let's go to Cleveland at Minnesota. Cleveland, let's see, 140 dog to Minnesota. Tristan Mckenzie versus Sonny Gray. What are you doing with the pitching in this game?
Not too much. Sonny Gray only threw 65 pitches last time out. It was his first start after a 2-week, I think, COVID absence. I don't remember what it was, but he hadn't pitched in 2 weeks. He only threw 65 pitches. Makes it tough for me to really want to get to him at the $8,800 price tag. And then also, it's not like you have a lot of strikeouts in the Cleveland lineup either. Steven Kwan leading off doesn't strike out. Jose Ramirez doesn't strike out. So it's a really difficult lineup to pick up strikeouts against. On the other side, Tristan Mckenzie is a solid pitching prospect. He's struck out 22.4% of hitters this year, 4.46 xFIP, but a difficult matchup here against the Twins. I'm more interested in the bats here than the pitching.
Yeah, I think the bats are like somewhat interesting. Okay, you got 84 degrees in Minnesota today, so pretty hot conditions. The pitchers like not like moving the needle a ton in either direction. And it does look like Cleveland is expensive enough that that's on causing them not to get a ton of ownership. So between the two teams, which way are you leaning?
I prefer the Minnesota side. They do not have Byron Buxton in the lineup tonight, though, so that does make them look a little bit worse. But Max Kepler looks good hitting third. Carlos Correa is a strong shortstop option. I really like Alex Kirilloff if you do need to save some money. He's another top hitting prospect. It's kind of been a theme recently on DraftKings is you just have all of these top hitting prospects coming up to the majors and being priced like they are career minor leaguers or something. So getting Kirilloff at 2,500 with first base outfield eligibility, I think is another really good spot to get to.
Definitely. I don't mind. Yeah, the stacks are good here. I don't mind taking a shot on Tristan Mckenzie either. He looks like he's getting like low single digit ownership, and he's got decent strikeout numbers. Better last year than this year, but still. All right, let's go to St. Louis at Milwaukee. 9 over under here, so pretty favorable hitting conditions. Got 80 degrees. Eric Lauer versus Wainwright. Doing anything with the pitchers in this one?
Lauer, if Lauer were a little bit cheaper, I'd be more interested, but it's a really difficult matchup against St. Louis. The only like case that I could make for him would just be that he's a pretty good strikeout pitcher. He's got about a 25% strikeout percentage, and he's not getting much ownership here, but it's just really difficult, I think, to get to that price tag in a tough strikeout matchup. So not really that interested there. And then for Wainwright, there are strikeouts to be had in the Minnesota line or Milwaukee lineup, but Wainwright's not a particularly good strikeout pitcher, sub 20% strikeout percentage, and there's not really a lack of value pitching today. So it's pretty tough for me to get much of either guy.
Yeah, that is fair. Eric Lauer, I'm surprised at how high owned he is, to be honest, because it seems like team total for the Cards is high, the strikeout rate of the team's low, and the price tag's high. So I'm a little bit surprised by that.
We have him at 5%, right?
Okay, maybe I pulled in numbers.
Oh no, I hadn't refreshed. He's up to 10%.
Yeah, 10%. That's what I was looking at. So that does seem like quite high. So if you're thinking about going to him, like he's sneaky, I would think twice about that one.
Yeah, like I think I'd rather go to Skubal at 13% instead of Lauer at 10.
Definitely. What do you think about the bats in this one?
I really am interested in the Cardinals. I'm refreshing now, but they haven't been projected for much ownership all day. Now they're up to 6%, but we have them with the second highest top stack percentage at 8%. Paul Goldschmidt's back in the lineup, so that's good to see. You have a cheap Dylan Carlson hitting second, so a nice lineup bump for him. Nolan Arenado, Juan Yepes is are in the middle of the order. Albert Pujols is in the lineup batting sixth. It's nice that he dropped down to sixth because he's not somebody that you particularly want in your stacks. So getting him out of the 4 spot is good. So yeah, I like the Cardinals here. Lauer is a pretty good pitcher, but the Cardinals do have the second best WRC plus in baseball. They don't strike out a lot. They have decent power. Lauer this year has also had issues with right-handed power or power in general. 230 expected ISO, 211 actual ISO, 2 right-handed hitters. It sets up as a pretty good spot for the Cardinals, I think.
Agreed. One of the interesting like strategic decisions, I think, with like the Cardinals are a good example of this, is you have 2 players at the same position that are both like GPP viable, Paul Goldschmidt and Albert Pujols, who are at the same position, like first base only. Like when teams have like 2 players that you can't put in the same lineup together, and like in this case, one's way more popular than the other. Like Paul Goldschmidt is 15%, Albert Pujols is 1% in our latest update. Like, is that a strategy spot that you like to attack?
It kind of depends. In general, yes. The one thing I would point out here, though, is that it's not just a matter of Goldschmidt being better than Albert Pujols. It's a matter of Goldschmidt getting more plate appearances than Pujols, because most likely Pujols is getting taken out of the game as soon as Eric Lauer comes out.
Okay. That is a good thing to be paying attention to, is the platoon risk there. So righty lefty matchup. That makes sense. All right, let's move to the next one. Seattle at Oakland. Okay, George Kirby is one of the more popular pitchers tonight. It's mostly because he's super cheap on DraftKings at 6,600, and he's been really solid so far. 23% strikeout rate, 3.4% or 3.4 xFIP, much better than league average. And then the park in Oakland, 67 degrees, and the Athletics are just not very good this year. So, can you think of any reasons not to play George Kirby?
No, I really can't. He stands out to me along with Otani as my favorite pitching play. I even like him a little bit more than Jordan Montgomery just because he is a little bit cheaper and he does have better strikeout stuff. The matchup is also a little bit better. I don't really have any negatives here. I even think that the 23% ownership we have projected for Kirby is probably lower than it should be, given that he has one of the best chances of being a top 2 value. He also has a 13.5% chance of being a top 2 pitcher in terms of raw score. This is one of the best pitching prospects in baseball. He's had success in the majors so far this year. 8 starts, 43 innings pitched, 23% strikeout percentage, only walking 3% of guys. He struck out 34.5% of hitters at AAA this year. Like you said, Oakland's not very good. The park is favorable for pitchers. It's just such an inexpensive price tag on Kirby, but it's not like you're talking about him in the sense of just like, oh, he's too cheap. He projects well point per dollar. He has legitimate, one of the best pitcher on the slate upsides.
Good. Yeah, he seems like definitely one of the top 2 pitchers on DraftKings. And 23% ownership. I would expect it to come in a little bit higher. I'm a little bit surprised by that as well, given the matchup and the price. So I think Kirby's a very solid play. I wouldn't mind locking and loading him in any lineup. Now, the Seattle stack looks like one that is pretty expensive, not in great team total, but the ownership is very low as well. Are you doing anything with Seattle tonight?
I think it's kind of difficult to get there. It's still not a favorable park to hit in. The weather is not great for hitting either. Paul Blackburn's been solid this year, not in terms of strikeouts, not really from a fantasy standpoint, but 3.68 xFIP, 0.38 home runs allowed per 9 innings. Typically does a very good job keeping the ball in the park. So Seattle's not really standing out to me. Jesse Winker at 3,300 is cheap, but overall, I don't expect to get to a lot of the Mariners.
Nice. All right, let's move on to the last game then. We got Kansas City at the Los Angeles Angels. Daniel Lynch versus Shohei Otani. Okay, in LA tonight, 77 degrees. So a little bit hotter than an average maybe, but Shohei Otani, $8,500. He's facing Kansas City, or that's a relatively weak team, and they only have a team total of 3.6. So $8,500 definitely seems like a cheap price tag. On FanDuel 10K, he's still the highest projected owned pitcher as well. So what are you doing with Otani tonight?
Playing a lot of him. It's just another case where, he's getting 47% ownership. He's going to be the highest owned pitcher on the slate, but he's just completely underpriced. He has the best strikeout percentage on the slate. He has a good matchup against Kansas City. The Royals also don't have Salvi Perez in their lineup, so the lineup's even worse than it normally is. There's just such a big margin for error at this price tag for Otani. On FanDuel, he's a good play just because, he's still one of the best projected pitchers. But on DraftKings, like, the margin for error is just so high because even if he does get unlucky and gives up a few runs, he's most likely going to strike out enough guys where at 8,500, he still ends up being a solid play. So it's just really difficult for me to get away from. This is another reason why on DraftKings in particular, I think that I'm probably going to end up going to a lot of the low-owned stacks. It's going to make it difficult for me to get to teams like, the Cubs or whatever that project well, but they're also popular, because I'm just fully expecting to have tons of Shohei Otani and tons of George Kirby at these respective salaries. I'm going to probably just end up a lot more condensed on pitching and then spreading it out a bit more with the stacks.
Definitely. Yeah, that seems like a great move tonight because the chalk at pitching is cheap and like really solid. So it is tough to fade Otani, even though he's high owned. He looks like a great play. In general, like, okay, we have him projected for 20 points on DraftKings and 36 on FanDuel. So like half the time he goes over that projection is gonna yield like a good enough result for your GPP usually. So I think it's definitely a smart move to just lock in some of those good pitchers. One guy that is popping now is Daniel Lynch on the other side. Mike Trout, he was a surprising absence from the lineup today. Instead, they have David McKinnon batting fourth. I'm like, I gotta double check if this is right. Like, that's wild. So, like, I think the projection for Lynch went up a bunch with the Angels releasing this lineup. That, to be honest, is not great. Aside from Shohei Otani and Taylor Ward. So, does their new lineup affect you at all?
Yeah, Daniel Lynch is not a bad pitcher. He's got about a 22.5% strikeout percentage this year, 4.4 xFIP. He's one of Kansas City's better pitching prospects. The Angels are typically a scary matchup, but this lineup is really, really bad. Taylor Ward is good, Shohei Otani is good, and then it pretty much just falls off of a cliff. David McKinnon's a 27-year-old guy just now getting his first crack in the major leagues. He has some power, but isn't really anything special. This lineup is just really, really bad. The 6K price tag on Lynch is appealing. I still prefer George Kirby, but you can definitely throw Daniel Lynch in some tournament lineups here. Right now, we only have him projected for about 8% ownership as well. Maybe that does come up a little bit with the increase in projection between now and lock, but yeah, I mean, it's basically a AAA lineup for the Angels.
Yeah, it's that Pistons traded Jeremy Grant for a first rounder with the Blazers. That's interesting.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, I think that Daniel Lynch is. I think people are not going to react to this lineup probably, and he might even come in a little bit lower on than you expect. So I think he definitely moved up the board a decent amount. Now the Angels lineup, though, oh my god, I feel like whenever Otani pitches, like you can't. Okay, so you can't play him as a batter, and then like you're picking from these really like bottom of the barrel guys that are cheap. What are you doing with that?
I have a very difficult time getting to the Angels. I liked them earlier today. They were included in my top stacks or top tournament plays videos, but that was assuming Mike Trout was going to be in. And even then, I mentioned, the one thing that it sucks when Otani pitches, you are not only just not able to roster one of the best hitters in baseball, but you're also losing the 2 or 3 hitter in the lineup. So it makes your stacks just a little bit less appealing. And there's also less combinations that you can use. But without Trout in this lineup and then not being able to roster Otani, I like Taylor Ward. Luis Rengifo is a good value option if you need it, which you probably don't. But I just have a really tough time getting to this lineup, given that you can't roster Otani and Trout's not playing.
Agreed. Let's give an update on Baltimore before we turn it over to the Live Before Lock crew. All right, so I'm seeing that the forecast, it looks like the rain's coming in even earlier than before in the forecast. About 50% chance of rain at 7 p.m. and 79% at 8:30-ish. And it does look like once the rain starts, there's a decent possibility that it may not stop. So I'm kind of feeling like Baltimore could be a good fade today. Like in general, I feel like the odds are more in your favor of fading if there's a weather game, because like the chance of any one baseball game going off in the first place are pretty low, even if it plays. So the risk reward isn't usually that bad. What are you thinking here?
I'm still playing it for now. I mean, I don't disagree with you, but that as far as the risk goes. But yeah, for now, I'm still going to it unless things change.
All right, let me run a new ownership update to account for this, because I feel like people might get a little bit scared off. But yeah, that one will be one that hopefully the guys on Live Before Lock can help with. It is a little bit of a trickier one because the rain is supposed to come mid-game, so we might not have a great idea by lock if it's going to be. It probably won't start in delay or anything like that. Like if you fade it, you're hoping for a suspended game. So guys, stay tuned all the way up to lock so you can get all the latest updates here. Give us a like and subscribe while you're at it. Just gives us that positive feedback that Eric and Greg will need to be able to give their best on Live Before Lock. And guys, stay tuned and good luck.
Good morning, everybody. Ben Reza here from Odd Shopper, bringing you my best bet of the day to get things started on Wednesday, June 22nd from across the sports world. We're going to talk a little NHL, Stanley Cup Playoffs, and we're going to talk about why, if you are a new user at BetMGM, you can get $200 free if you sign up. What you want to do, pinned in the comments of this video, go there, use that link in the description, sign up, deposit, bet $10, win $200 if, here's the if, either team scores a goal tonight. I think we can safely say someone will have to do that. That's the rules of hockey. You can use the promo code BensBet as well. Once one of those teams scores, boom, $200 in free bets, courtesy of BetMGM, a great way to boost the bankroll. You know what wasn't a good way to boost the bankroll? The Minnesota Twins laying a run and a half yesterday. They were up 5-3 in the 8th inning. I thought we stole it. We did not. They lost the game outright. That was the one silver lining. We avoided laying juice. We've been taking plus money dogs. When you break even on those, win one, lose one, you're still eking out profits. So I can live with that. But a disappointing end to that game. They were up 5-3 late. Thought we could have stole that. Now, taking a break from baseball, we're going to the Stanley Cup playoffs. A massive, massive game 4 tonight. I could do one of mine. I'm going to keep this video super short. I think the Avalanche are better. See you guys tomorrow. But I will dig into why I'm just going to lay the straight bet, -110. I think the Avs go up 3-1 tonight against the 2-time defending champs who simply cannot be killed. So the Avalanche, if you think that what their road has just been super weak, you're not going to believe it, some of these stats, but I don't think it's been that bad. I'm not saying the Predators are world beaters, but the Blues are a solid team. The Oilers are a high-powered offense. They dismantled all of them, particularly on the road. So we're going to throw game 3 out. That was their worst performing game, and we'll get that to that in a second. Before that, road games for the Avalanche, goals scored 7, 5, 5, 6, 3, 4, 6. They put up a ton of goals every time they are away from home. 7-0 on the road in the playoffs before that game 3. Now, they're up 2-0 in the series. They head to Tampa, 2-1 early, 3-2. The game gets away from them. Tampa Bay, being the champs, they didn't punch first, but they punched off and win that game very comfortably, 6-2. That was the worst that the Avalanche have looked all playoffs. Now, they haven't lost back-to-back games in the playoffs. That's a nice little stat. They also have only lost 2 games before that, so that doesn't really mean much. The thing that I really was drawn to, I wanted to dig in and say, okay, what happened in game 3 that caused problems for them, and is it repeatable? Was it an outlier? What do we really have to look at? The thing I was drawn to were the shots on goal in the playoffs. Game 1, Avs win in overtime, kind of control the game. 38-23, they have the shot advantage. Game 2, they win 6.
Yes, everybody, it is that time. Bring the puns. It is live before lock. Why not? I'm Eric Lindquist, excited to be with you guys talking through today's baseball slate. We got a little bit of weather. First time in a while that there's some weather to be paying attention to. We'll be doing that here with you. And I've got just the guy. I believe Weatherman Greg is in the house here. He uses Google better than anybody else around that you know. That's for sure. He's got the goods for Baltimore, but at Ehrenberg DFS is where you can find him on Twitter. Strong recommend in the Twitter streets. How you doing, my dude?
Yeah, good. Like you said, first time we've had a weather game in a little bit. The Washington-Baltimore game, that's one that has a little bit of potential concerns when it comes to weather. At least as of now, it's not something I'm taking out of my player pool, but I'm going to be monitoring. I'll be Googling as we go through the show, try to figure out what's going to happen there from a weather standpoint. But as of now, I still have it in my player pool. Do you?
I do too. It's something to be paying attention to. Alex was talking about it at the tail end of the last show. I think it's definitely something that we're going to be paying attention to over here at Stokastic. Good to have you. Hit the like button, subscribe button, notification bell. All of that goes a long way for us, especially in the middle of a name change. We want to look cool. We want to have those likes so that we can just keep this vibe going here that we had at Osmo. Keep it going here at Stokastic. We're presented today by Odd Chopper. We'll get to them here in a little bit. But Greg, right in the onset, we got Luis Gonzalez. He is scratched. I did have some San Francisco interest, which we'll talk about here a little bit later. But anything else stick out to you so far on this slate before we dive in?
No, not really. I mean, obviously, Luis Gonzalez being scratched, don't play him in your lineups. But one thing that actually does kind of change when it comes to the San Francisco Giants, and by the way, Charlie Morton's been really good this year. And as of late, I know that the ERA isn't good, but the underlying numbers are. One thing that is kind of nice if you are interested in stacking the San Francisco Giants today, that does limit the pinch hit possibilities, because this is a team that usually you just immediately say, all right, the starting pitcher comes out. That means that we're doing a full hockey line change and everybody's coming out of the lineup and we're just playing, right-handed pitcher. Well, cool. Lefty's coming in. We got a bunch of right-handed bats off the bench. But with them being down a man, I think that does kind of limit some of their pinch hit options.
Yeah, it does. And we just got the other line. Where did that line up? I just had it up here a second ago. Let me pull it back up. But either way, I wanted to just see who the guy that got inserted in was. We had wins in lineup already. Longoria is now joined the party. This actually becomes more fun. The frustrating thing about San Francisco today, a team that I did want to get to above the field, one of the interesting things was that first base, you have 4 options and you can only play one dude at first base. So that becomes really frustrating. Belt, Ruff, and La Stella, all only first base on DraftKings. Flores, you can play at third if need be. But now you have to talk about Longoria being added to the lineup, who I think is going to come in under-owned just because it came out late. Why not get to some Longoria in your life against Morton? I'm going to be doing that. It's a very serviceable hitter to just have. Normally you get like I'm trying to think of like a Nicky Lopez would be somebody who gets added to a lineup and it's like, oh, I'm not that intrigued by it. Evan Longoria is a legitimate stick that's going to be 1-2% owned.
Yeah, potentially. I mean, the only issue I have with it is that Charlie Morton's my favorite tournament pitcher today. So we'll talk more about him later. But I mean, it's if you're looking at the pitchers today, there just aren't that many of them to choose from other than the obvious chalk plays, right? Shohei Otani is going to be massively popular as a pitcher. Can't roster him as a hitter. That's an impossible situation to figure out, apparently. Then you got Carlos Rodon, fairly tough matchup for him. He's also going to be really popular. Then his value-saving options, you got some ownership going to George Kirby and Jordan Montgomery. Outside of that, nothing is popular at pitcher, and you're just trying to kind of go through these pitchers and try to find out what's a viable contrarian option. And I don't see much I like outside of Charlie Morton.
Interesting. I mean, what about our boy Scooble?
Well,
come on now. Positive leverage. This lineup from Boston is trying to think of a trash dumpster thrown inside of a flaming hot garbage can of another trash dumpster.
I mean, Scooble is definitely a viable contrarian option. I think that Morton's better though.
Okay. Well, I'm happy to talk through that here in a second. But first, Jordan Lockhart coming in, throwing $1 bills around like it's his job. 10 gifted subs. We appreciate you, my guy, my guy. We got Ryan Renabaum gets the sub in there. Flex, good to see them get hooked up with a sub. SS28, what a good human being. Jordan Lockhart, just keep doing you. You're the man. We appreciate you here over at Stokastic. That is for damn sure. But let's start with some pitchers. And I want to talk through the chalky options first, because I'm curious if there's either one of or any of these extremely popular pitchers. We got Otani, Rodon, Kirby. I think it's pretty clear cut that those are going to be the 3 most popular pitchers on today's slate. I think they're all fantastic. I think Rodon's the one guy you could maybe hit the brakes on, but something tells me Kirby might end up a little bit higher than 25%. And something tells me Rodon, considering it's a potent Atlanta team with some righties to be scared of, might come in a little bit lower. Also pretty warm in Atlanta. How do you look at these 3 pitchers at the top of the board for DK purposes?
Yeah, and I mean, include Jordan Montgomery in the mix also. Okay. I think he's going to be fairly popular. So I think Otani is the safest. And it's hard to call Otani safe because he's kind of all over the place as a pitcher. Sometimes he looks lights out. Other times he just walks everybody and can't make it out of a couple of innings of work. But relative to his price point today, starting with DraftKings at 8,500, I think he is the safest option. Pretty decent matchup against Kansas City Royals. He's also pitching at home, which helps him out a little bit. The Royals don't have the best offense in the world. So relative to his price point, his matchup, and the other pitchers that we're comparing him to, I think Otani is the safest pitcher on DK. FanDuel brings in a whole nother can of worms, though, because he's a lot more expensive on FanDuel. He's $10,000, and he's also really popular on FanDuel. 33% ownership for Otani at $10,000. So to me, I'm already a little bit underweight to him for DraftKings purposes. For FanDuel, though, I definitely think it makes sense to be underweight to him when he's going to be 33% owned on a single pitcher site.
Yeah. Otani's in such a good spot against Kansas City. And I know it's been a little bit warmer here in recent days. I think kind of a number of things have shifted. George Kirby in a better pitching environment today than what he would have been pitching in yesterday. It's about 15 degrees cooler projected for first pitch there. Thought I was going to win all the money yesterday with Seattle stack starting to go bonkers in the 8th inning. Then you had the Otani double dog, and the dream was dead. The dream was dead, but still, I like George Kirby from a pitching perspective here today. I think there's really no surprise in that. I would probably get to, if he's going to truly be 25%, I want to get to more George Kirby, a little less Otani at 49%. I'm with you, where I think he's the safest pitching option on the board. But we're talking tournaments. We're talking how do we get some upside stacks, and some of the more expensive hitters are not necessarily in the best ballparks or game environments. That being Aaron Judge, New York Yankees, and Tampa Bay. You get Acuna and such against Rodon. That's kind of going to be the path though, where Otani, Kirby have some viability. Rodon goes a little bit slept on. I'm going to be around the field, I think, on him, but not going to make any gigantic stands. Where I think I want to start making stands is Jordan Montgomery. I have almost none of him today, and I get it. Like, he's in a great ballpark, and this Tampa Bay offense, I think just looking through the lineup, there are some Ks available. I mean, you get Josh Lau back. The guy's around a 38% K percentage, just ridiculous number. Taylor Walls, 26.6%, and Rosarena, 25%. I get it, but I just don't find him to be the most appealing arm. Sub 20% K percentage, lots of K percentage around the board at other places. Are you getting to much Jordan Montgomery today?
Yeah, and it's a lot of the same stuff that we talked about. I'm pretty sure you and I did a show together for his last start. If not, I could just guess, and I'd probably be right because you and I do a lot of our shows together. But I'm not overly concerned with the dip in strikeout rate for Jordan Montgomery, just because his swing strike rate is so ridiculously high this year. He has a 14.3% swing strike rate this year, by far the highest of his career. So the strikeouts are going to be there. I think that this is really just small sample size thing, a little bit of a fluke. Also, let me look at his matchups. Has he had difficult matchups for strikeout purposes? So some recent matchups for him: Toronto, I guess. By the way, he's been really, he has 5 or 4 strikeouts in almost every single start so far this year. So we definitely haven't seen upside from a strikeout perspective. He's actually had 5 or 4 in all but 2 starts this year and hasn't gone beyond 5. But considering the swing strike rate is up, don't we just have to assume that the strikeouts are going to come at some point?
Yes and no. I don't really. This is like Mr. Theoretical. I don't know the right way to put this. There are certain pitch counts when I want to look at what is he in terms of like with 2 strikes. Like, what is the swinging strike rate in that kind of a perspective, as opposed to like, I just go through some of the numbers. Like, the curveball is the real thing that's inducing whiffs. Put away, I mean, he is getting to that curveball and it's actually working decently well, but it's a pitch he's throwing around 21% of the time. I would just be curious to see. Let me pull up the counts, because again, you have in Savant the ability to look at like an 0-2 count. You can kind of see exactly what that whiff percentage is. Doesn't seem like the curveball. Well, no, 52% with an 0-2 count. All right. So you can kind of go through a couple of these and really find more information in terms of like his put away numbers. 28.9% with an 0-2 count is pretty solid. I'm not going to lie. 2-2 count, a little bit more intrigued, more middle of the road, 50% whiff percentage, 31.6% on that sinker. That's his main pitch this season. I don't know why he's throwing that just drastically more. I mean, he went from throwing it around 10% of the time last season to around 35% of the time. And yeah, it's inducing some whiffs here at the moment, but it doesn't look like a positive pitch to me. It's definitely the pitch that has been kept in the yard. It is good from a real life perspective. 167 slugging, 144 expected slugging. Things kind of stand out there, but I don't know. I'm not very enthusiastic getting to him. Sub 20% is other guys that have equal swinging strike rates and are actually getting the Ks.
So who would you say has an equal swinging strike rate that's getting strikeouts, though, that isn't getting owned for a cheaper price point today?
Well, that's a completely different question. I mean, 7,400. Do I have to try to make it a thing when I can go to George Kirby? And this is maybe kind of where I'm just getting very contrarian with some of my stacks today. And pitcher, I don't find a whole lot of reason to get away from Otani, even if I'm a little under the field. Getting away from Rodon, getting away from Kirby. I just feel like Jordan Montgomery, the number of times he's going to own me or burn me in this spot, I feel pretty confident being under the field here against Tampa Bay. Sure, it's a great ballpark upgrade here as opposed to Yankee Stadium, but it just doesn't match up for me. When I see Tariq Skubal coming in at 13.2%, why would I not just ramp it up, especially with this Boston lineup that I'm looking at? You get Ref Snyder in the 2-hole, Duran here leading off with his 24% K percentage, despite some of the speed that we've seen from him. You get Trevor Story, Bobby Dahlbeck back in the fray. Like, there are some strikeouts to be had here. I know he's a completely different price range, but like, if I'm going to get contrarian at pitcher, give me our boy Skubal.
Yeah, I mean, I think Skubal is also a good option. Just as far as cheap guys go, there aren't really guys I want to get to beyond Jordan Montgomery and George Kirby. I'm overweight to Montgomery right now in my build. Kirby does look a little bit too popular for me relative to the amount of exposure I'm getting. And I like George Kirby. I've bet on his over strikeout props a bunch this year. I just don't have him in 26% of my lineups right now. So I kind of have the ownership in my lineups a little bit inverse between Montgomery and Skubal. As far as the pay up guys go, I mean, it is going to be really hard to get away from Shohei Otani, but it's still to an extent. Like in the build I have right now, I have him in about 40% of my lineup. So he's my most rostered pitcher, but it's still less than the field on DraftKings.
Okay. Well, let's continue down here. See if we can find anything lower owned for the people. Again, I feel like the pitchers are pretty secure at the top end of the board. But looking at Eric Lauer, he's getting a little bit too much ownership for me, even though he's a guy that I feel like he's got pretty good strikeout stuff over the course of this season. It's just a Cardinals team. Every time that they're going to be on the plate, you get Paul Goldschmidt back in the lineup against left-handed pitching. The guy's a 266 WRC plus, by far the best in baseball. That's over 20 points higher than Wilson Contreras. We're talking ridiculous kind of stuff. Between him being out of the lineup yesterday and him back in today, I really don't want to screw with much Eric Lauer. Do you?
No, and you and I, we loved this guy at the start of the season. Remember how I was like, oh, this is the Robbie Ray of the season, the left-hand pitcher who comes out of nowhere. He'd increased velocity. He was generating a bunch of strikeouts. And things have gotten terrible for him since the first month of the season. So March and April, he had a 36.6% K rate and a 2.53 FIP. Really, really good numbers. Cy Young caliber worthy numbers. May comes down to earth, but still looks okay, although the runs were a little bit concerning. 23.5% K rate, solid, 4.84 FIP. And it's like, all right, not the guy he was in the first half of the season, but still acceptable. June, 14.3% K rate, that's alarming. 7.57 FIP, also alarming. So whatever happened from Eric Lauer from the first month of the season to the second month to the third month, this is a bad trend for him, and it's definitely concerning. So I have no interest in Lauer. I do like stacking against him today, though.
I do too. St. Louis is going to be a team that we definitely talk about from my perspective. And I don't think that should be any surprise to anybody who's watched any shows that I've done. This St. Louis lineup against a lefty is just ridiculous. Even Corbin, I expect him eventually, even in the 7-hole. We saw the power he has against righties. Well, it's going to show up around the board here. But anybody else down here at the bottom end of pitcher? Yeah. Well, no, let's just do it. Let's do the Charlie Morton. Let's have the conversation here. You're high on him. I'm not today. How are you landing on as much Charlie Morton today as what you want to get to?
Yeah, I mean, his underlying numbers are really good, and there's a lot of strikeout upside. So Charlie Morton this year, 25.3% K rate. He's always been a pretty good strikeout pitcher. He does have a 5.08 ERA, but he's a 4.44 expected ERA and a 4.24 FIP. So the number one thing that's been an issue for Charlie Morton this year has just been some bad batted ball luck. He has a 324 batting average on balls in play. That is the worst mark of his career. The only year that was worse was in 2020, but that was an injury shortened season, and also shortened season in general. And he only made 9 starts that year. So if we take that one out of the mix, the 324 BABIP is so out of line for what we normally see from Charlie Morton. And, you know, he's giving up a little bit more hard contact, well, a little more barrels this year. Actually, his hard contact rate is down 26.5% compared to 27.9% for his career. And then also he's pitched much better as of late. When I was talking about the trends with Eric Lauer, now he's been getting worse as the season's gone on. The numbers for Charlie Morton, it's the inverse. So Morton so far in June, let's see, let me pull up his splits. Yeah, so Charlie Morton in June has a 39% K rate and a 3.24 FIP. So actually, these numbers are almost directly the inverse of Eric Lauer. First month of the season for Charlie Morton, 17.4% K rate, 5.79 FIP. Second month of the season, 22.8% K rate, 3.92 FIP. So much better than the first month. And then so far in June, 39.2% K rate, 3.24 FIP. So I do think that he maybe was dealing with underlying injury, or maybe it could have just been a thing where there was no spring training this year, and it took him a little bit while to get ramped up here. But it does seem like he's pitching much better now than he was a couple months ago.
Do you have any concerns about the fact that it's 97 degrees in Atlanta and the wind's blowing out?
I mean, it's not the ideal pitching conditions, but if he's going to generate as many strikeouts as he has as of late, it doesn't matter if he gets swing and misses.
Okay. I'm just looking at the weather, man, and it is so hard for me to want to make a case for a guy that started to have, as you said, he's got decent enough peripherals there, but a 40.5% hard hit percentage, 8.1% barrel rate that I'm looking at. I see the 4.45 expected ERA. The fastball's still been decent in terms of velocity, that mid 90s that he's continued to have here. So that's not an issue. He's 38 years old, though. I do expect decline sooner rather than later. It's not a pitcher that I was high on for year long, where he was getting drafted ADP wise. And I just think I've just been lower on Charlie Morton throughout this entire season. And it's generally been a spot. I mean, the curve spin is still constantly up, and that's going to be a very, very powerful thing for him from start to start. But I just look at this weather, and if I'm trying to get contrarian with bats, nobody wants to be stacking up against Charlie Morton today, really. It just doesn't feel like that, at least. And there's so much positive leverage. Now I get Longoria instead of Luis Gonzalez, another serviceable guy to add into stacks, especially for like FanDuel purposes. I have a lot of revamping to do on my end because I had a ton of Luis Gonzalez coming into the show. Just he was batting second and it made sense. But I'm very high on San Francisco on the other end. And I just think it's a game environment that that's kind of why Rodon isn't a guy. I think I would be playing a ton of Rodon if it weren't for this game environment specifically. I just want to try to make both of these offenses a thing. So by default, I'm going to be slightly lower on both of the pitchers, but exponentially lower on Morton than you, I think. But I get what you're seeing, and I totally understand that he's not owned where he would be if this were 65 degrees and wind was blowing in or something. I mean, I
don't even know if that's it though, because Rodon is still picking up a ton of ownership. I just think people are low on Morton in general. I think that's the real reason.
Okay. Well, I just love San Francisco today. So I'm probably going to be on the other side of it, but I'm going to get a little bit of Morton here now. He wasn't even in my pool before. So I'll get some sprinkles because I trust you and trust what you're looking at. I think we kind of arrived to different conclusions looking at the same things. I think that's what's really fun about MLB DFS is that some days I'm going to be right, some days you're going to be right, but it's really about the range of outcomes and embracing volatility and not just, just being a little lemming out in the world. Like, I don't know. I'm not going to say his name. He's a lovely person. He hasn't said anything mean to me. Sean V. Hi, what's up, my friend?
But don't forget the most beloved situations are not where one of us is right. The other, it's where we're both wrong. That's where we thrive.
That is literally where it is. That's where it is. Yeah.
There we go. There he is popping up. Sean V on your side today. He does not like Morton as a play today.
Because Giants don't chase anything out of this. Sean V, I was just defending you. You got to go to timeout now. You can't have my take, but for some ludicrous reason.
So the other thing too is I'm not going to say I have a massive amount of confidence in Charlie Morton. It's just where am I going to go if I'm going to be contrarian at pitcher? Because we've got a lot of ownership going to Shohei Otani, Carlos Rodon, and George Kirby. And then we start to look at who are the contrarian pitching options. There's only three that I think are viable, and it's Morton, Skubal, and Montgomery. Those are the only, with the latest ownership update with Montgomery coming down a little bit in ownership, those are the only three I really like at lesser ownership. I'm not dying to play anybody else. Maybe there's somebody you could talk me into, but there's nobody I really want to back.
Daniel Lynch.
Yeah, that's going to be a no for me.
Why not? Why not Daniel Lynch? If you looked at this Angels lineup too, and again, this is one of those things where I've been playing Daniel Lynch way more than the average bear. It hasn't gone well. And you know what I didn't do was play Daniel Lynch against Oakland, and I'm still kicking myself. He's a touted prospect. I can even just tell you that we do so many of these damn shows where it's like, I know he's drafted 34th in a draft once upon a time. I know that he was like a legitimate prospect. I know that he's the southpaw that had some strikeout upside, but it hasn't put together over a 5 ERA, over a 1.5 whip. I mean, I know that he has been bad, but now we're starting to see him at least acclimate. Baltimore, Oakland, really nice matchups, but so is this Angels team. And obviously what matters with Lynch is that Otani is in the lineup. Like for DFS purposes, obviously you can't play him, but that's definitely a left on left that you got to still be worried about. But the rest of this lineup, you take Trout out of this thing and you get by Ward and Otani, and it is pretty scotch free. I think Daniel Lynch for an SP2 option, less so on FanDuel, not going to do it, but I think he's got some appeal at 6K. I'm well over the field on him. Do you want to join me, or is that an adamant no in the way that adamant no for Morton for me?
It's a no for me. I don't know. I'd call it adamant because Mike Trout's out of the lineup and it's a better matchup. And, it's not quite like NBA where one player's out of the lineup, somebody steps in or whatever, where it would make somebody a smash in terms of a value play. but clearly it's beneficial for Daniel Lynch. The real issue I have with him, other than his lack of success at the big league level, is that he didn't pitch well in the minor leagues either. So when we saw him in the minor leagues last year, he had a 5.84 ERA and a 4.57 FIP. So on one hand, cool, it's an easier matchup for Daniel Lynch because Mike Trout is out of the lineup. But then on the same time also, he didn't get minor league hitters out the last time he pitched in the minor leagues, and that's carried over to him not having big league success. So the biggest issue for me is just I don't think he's good.
Seems important. If you think somebody is bad at pitching, you probably don't have to roster them.
Yeah, and the other thing too, so he generates strikeouts, but he has a low K rate. So his K percentage is 22.4. The reason that his strikeouts per 9 innings look he has a 9.15 strikeouts per 9 innings. Usually you would think that means somebody is higher than a 22.4% K rate. The issue is that if he is not striking guys out, there's a good chance he's just not getting them out at all. He gives up a lot of hard contact. He walks guys. So the reason his Ks per 9 is higher than what his strikeout rate is just because of that reason. If he's not generating the strikeouts, the guys are getting on base against him more than other players. And the other thing too is talking about the BABIP angle. Sure, he is a 327 BABIP this year, which is the reason why his underlying stats look worse than what his look better than what his actual ERA is. But he has a very high hard contact allowed rate. And also look at his minor league numbers when it comes to batting average on balls in play. 390, 324, 429, 333, 330, 343. This was a common thing going back to the minor leagues. He's always a guy that allowed a higher than average BABIP. And I think that's just going to be the case going forward. So I think the over 5 ERA is probably more indicative of his actual talent level than the underlying numbers, which have him with a fair ERA in the mid 4s.
All right. Well, pitching, we're going to be, I think just to kind of recap for the people, especially if you've gotten in here late, hit the like button, by the way. That would go a long way for both Greg, for myself, and for Tyler Zander, because he cares about likes too, right? Right, Tyler? Tyler Zander doing a great job per usual. Love my high school photo in the background. I still don't understand, but here we are. Carlos Rodon, a little bit underneath, but still a good play. Otani and George Kirby, impossible for me to get away from, but also maybe not at 50% and 25% respectively. I'm going to be over 25% on George Kirby, but your favorite tournament pitching option, Charlie Morton, correct?
Favorite tournament pitching option it's pretty close between Morton and Montgomery, but I'll give the lean to Morton there, just in terms of guys I'm overweight to. So there's 3 pitchers that I'm overweight to in a way that matters today: Montgomery, Morton, and Scuball. What happened?
Nothing. Just a funny thing that happened. Jordan Lockhart's in the chat, though. $10 super chat. So that needs some respect. 4 or 5 man stack on DK today? Question mark. It's going to be always a 5-man unless late news comes out and I just have to reorganize things in a weird way. But Greg, what do you say?
Yeah, 5-man stack on DK. Also, shout out to Jordan Lockhart for gifting all of the memberships in YouTube again. I see you. We appreciate you. But the answer is always 5-man stacks for me.
I said that. I gave him his props. He's fantastic.
I wanted to also. I could do it too. There's not a limit on the amount of times we could thank people, Eric.
Okay. Sassy pants. Hey guys, Stokastic. Here we go. Check out Stokastic Plus tools and content for every DFS sport that we have going here right now for 50% off the Platinum Plus plan. That is MLB Live that will get that done for you. All caps, one word. If you guys want to check out not just the top pitchers tool, which is awesome, the top stacks tool, which is even awesomer. And then we've got the top hitters tool, which I love using as kind of a reminder that, hey, you don't have to always be running around with the chalk when there's high home run odds on a Contreras. Obviously today there's everybody's going to be playing Wilson Contreras, but such is life. There are a lot of other positions where I think we can find some leverage, and that top batters tool will help you do that day in, day out. Designed by Sean Zahn, pretty good at MLB DFS. I would listen to him. Plus, then we have the top drivers tool for NASCAR. We have the top golfers tool for PGA. Everything you could know and want here at Stokastic using MLB Live. Stop guessing, start winning, and join us here at Stokastic Plus today. Let's do it, my friend. We head over to stacks. Stacks.
Oh, wait, is there in terms of pitchers, is there anybody else that you like at the bottom?
No. I mean, Keegan Thompson, people might look at a box score and say, hey, I could get to a share or two of him. The wind was blowing in hard against Atlanta, and he was able to rack up strikeouts in like a ridiculous way. He basically was playing with with a fan directly into the batters, that's pretty useful. I have no interest against Pittsburgh today.
Yeah, I think the one that does merit at least conversation is Shane Baz, just because he is a very, very well-regarded prospect. And we've seen up and down outings from him so far to open up this season. And obviously, this is a brutally difficult matchup against the Yankees. But we've seen 2 starts so far out of Baz. His first one was against the Minnesota Twins. He pitched 2 innings and gave up 5 runs. That's a negative. But then he followed that up by pitching 6 innings against the Baltimore Orioles, 6 shutout innings with 7 strikeouts, no walks. I have him in my player pool, at least. He's not a core piece of my player pool, but I think as an SP2 on DraftKings, he makes some sense. Over on FanDuel, I also think he makes sense just because he's only 7,200.
Okay. That's a good shout out. I have like 2%. I have nothing significant on him. Daniel Lynch is absorbing a lot of my ownership because why wouldn't he, right? I know he's just going to get murdered today. I'm just talking Matt Duffy into a double donk game. By the way, also, as bad as Matt Duffy was, and we called it out, he's somehow even worse when you go through the numbers. 0 home runs on the year. 0. With
0.
protection
0.
of like Otani in front of him, Trout in front of him generally. He was batting cleanup for a Major League Baseball team and has 5 RBIs and no homers on the season. And by the way, he's played a lot.
Yeah, and he's been hitting in good lineup spots in the middle of the order. I mean, do we just make... Here's the thing. We've made fun of Matt Duffy a lot. And I mean, we can make fun of Matt Duffy every day, and it's generally going to go well. Eventually, he's going to have a good game, you would think, just because he can't just suck forever. But maybe he does just suck forever.
Sometimes maybe shit. Sometimes maybe shit. There it is. I missed it. Tyler, I missed that sound effect. Where'd you go? I miss you so. It's fine. Let's go to some stacks now, shall we?
Let's do it.
All right. Cubs. That's a no from me, dog. That's my start of the conversation. Literally
okay.
The Cubs. I don't know what else to say other than I don't want to play them at this ownership. This is absurd.
Yeah, so we have had, let me refresh the top stacks tool because I still have it from earlier in the day. By the way, we've had a lot of success by just not playing these uber chalky offenses as of late. Eventually, they're going to go off again, but at least lately, like the spots that we've been off the Angels offense has sucked as of late. As like, I think not playing the Angels when they've been popular lately is probably the sole reason that I've had some profitable slates as of late.
Until Otani decided to go completely rogue and I was winning the $4 and then I didn't win the $4, Greg. You know why I didn't win the $4? Because frickin' Otani. That's
what's funny is I would have thought that last night just giant stacks would have absolutely shipped everything against Strider, but I guess just not enough people, because they were the nuts. I just don't think enough people stacked them.
No, it ended up being Seattle. And I mean, it was that 8th inning. You had you had Rodriguez homer, you had Winker homer, you had Suarez homer. It came back around. You got more out of Julio. It was just a massive smash from those guys. And then you had Witt and Otani go completely nuts, and you needed those 2 pieces basically because they were owned enough. And I mean, Otani was very chalky for a 13-game slate, but like you needed those 2 pieces to be able to win at that point.
But I think the Giants, like the entire bottom half of the Giants lineup, all scored like 20 plus fantasy points. Just nobody played them.
Right. Oh, that's probably the right way of looking at it.
Yeah, like the nuts was the Giants, just nobody had the nuts because it was a stack that nobody played. Strider was a uber chalky pitcher. It didn't seem like a good spot for the Giants on paper. And then even if you did watch them as a contrarian stack, chances are you weren't playing the bottom 5 guys in the lineups.
Giants only 1 homer, I think. I can think of 2 off the top of my head. I know Wynn's homered and I know Jock homered. I don't know who else homered, but
yeah. So it was only those 2 that homered. But still, if you look at the bottom of the order, like Wynn was 3 for 4 with a double and a homer. Then you also, I mean, just across the lineup, there was a bunch of guys that had extra base hits, RBIs, runs scored. They put up 12 runs.
Yeah, it was a smash. I'm not besmirching anything that happened there. I mean, it just nobody played them because it was kind of tough to land there. I would suppose you would think, Strider, why'd you have to do it? Why do you have to do us like that? We have futures tickets on you and we had all of you in DFS. It was painful, but thank you for Seattle going homer. That was useful. But either way, I'm not on them today. I we'll talk about the stack I'm on the most, and it's St. Louis. I mean, this is just a team against Eric Lauer. Anytime that they're facing lefties, I mean, the numbers have definitely come down a little bit more to earth. I mean, the Yankees have just gone completely batshit crazy against every handedness, it would seem. But looking at the White Sox, they're absolute lefty killers, which is so weird to be looking at. 137 WRC plus. But you have St. Louis now fourth in baseball, 118 WRC plus. You get Goldschmidt back in this lineup. Massive importance there. 266 WRC plus. I sided with him. I love this baseball team. They're my favorite stack of the day. Greg, who is your favorite stack of the day?
You know, it's hard for me to pick out a favorite because there's not one stack I really like. There's a couple stacks I don't like. The Chicago Cubs certainly being one of them, going up against Jared Eikoff. And once again, it's not because this is a bad spot for the Cubs. Jared Eikoff hasn't been pitching this year and hasn't really pitched all that much over the last few years. But this is a bad Cubs offense in a pitcher-friendly ballpark that's projected for 20% ownership over on DraftKings. That's way too much ownership for the Cubs, basically in any spot. The only time the Cubs warrant that much ownership is if they're at home, the wind is blowing out like crazy, they're going up against a bad starting pitcher, and then they're also and then they're cheap. Like, it's even then, actually, I probably wouldn't get to 20% of them. And they're projected for 20% ownership on DraftKings, 19% on FanDuel. It's too much. We have them with the highest top stack odds on the slate and still nowhere near what their ownership is. So they're by far the most negatively leveraged team on the slate. I don't really have interest in getting to them. So same as you with that story. I like the Cardinals a lot. I think the Braves make a lot of sense. Mm-hmm. Even though I like Morton, I also think there's reason to go to the San Francisco Giants. But it's not like one offense that stands out above all the rest. Yesterday for me was clearly the St. Louis Cardinals, and Nolan Gorman ended up making the stack work. But there isn't one team like that I feel really good about today.
Yeah, I would say that that's the right way of looking at it. I'm in love with stacking up San Francisco. I think we've already talked about the game environment there, the guaranteed ninth inning bump. And you remove Luis Gonzalez. I'm assuming he's not going to be showing up to pinch hit in this game. If he does for like Darren Ruff, I will be furious. That will be not fun. But regardless, San Francisco, 97 degrees we're looking at in Atlanta, useful. Atlanta on the other side, I think that's a really good shout out. But as far as like positive leverage goes, you can pretty much stack up any team, not the Cubs, and find some ways around it. I'm still going to find my way onto shares of Minnesota against Tristan Mckenzie, who's been a really good real life pitcher. The strike rates come down a little bit this season, but I still think this Minnesota lineup, Alex Kirilloff is just going to be different. I'm telling you ahead of time, his AAA numbers are outrageous. From, over a 1.4 OPS that he had for the last month. I can't believe that that's a real thing. Alex Kirilloff is going to be different in this call-up than what you saw at the beginning of the season. Batting fifth today, even a little bit higher in the order. I find him an unavoidable piece that I want to get to. What do you think about the Twins and any other chalkier offenses that you're landing on?
Yeah, the Twins are also, they're the second most negatively leveraged offense on the slate going up against Tristan Mckenzie. I mean, there's just teams with better probabilities of being a top stack that I'd rather get to than the Twins. 5% top stack odds, 8% projected ownership. So, I mean, there's just a lot of teams, the Yankees, the Giants, the Brewers, the Nationals, the Braves, just teams that we've projected for lower ownership with higher top stack odds that I'm going to have to prioritize ahead of them. So I like Mckenzie as a pitcher, not for DFS purposes, but I don't really see this as a great spot to get to Minnesota. If you had to say the one team that I think if somebody's playing a single entry lineup and has to know what team to stack, I would say either the Braves because of the leverage off of Carlos Rodon or the Cardinals up against Lauer.
Look at that. I don't mind either of those shout outs. I would probably go San Francisco, but we are on such different sides of that one. The same case, I mean, Rodon's more popular than Morton, so I don't mind the leverage you're getting there. 33% of the field sinks. You get some leverage with Atlanta bats. I can't like the game environment for one pitcher and then not for the other. That would be very, very absurd. So I'm with you where I think Atlanta very viable, but I'd probably be going the San Francisco route. And I would definitely have Evan Longoria. He's going to be like 1 or 2% today. I can't imagine enough people haven't already made lineups or plugged everything in for DK purposes. And people are like, yes, I have to get to Longoria against Morton. He's going to be just crazy low owned.
Yeah, and according to our tools, being overweight to Morton and being overweight to the Giants offense, both of them make sense. And it's not because I don't expect both of them to do well, obviously, but neither of them are picking up ownership. The Giants are 3% owned as a team. Morton as a pitcher is only projected for, was it 12% ownership on DraftKings, 7% on FanDuel. So with that in mind, I think it's a spot that makes sense to get overweight to for both purposes, because if Morton's able to generate strikeouts, guess what? He's going to be good because he's striking guys out. But if he's giving up contact, the hitting conditions are so favorable that it's probably going to lead to runs scored on the other side. Maybe not as crazy as it was when, what was the final score of that game yesterday? 12-10 or 12-11 or something like that. So it won't quite be something like that, but there's for sure risk involved with both Rodon and Morton, but obvious upside as well.
All right. Well, let's continue down the board, my friend. Other offenses that you find yourself landing on quite a bit more than the field today.
So, I mean, we could talk more about the St. Louis Cardinals in the matchup against Eric Lauer. So if you guys didn't catch what I said about Lauer before, he's progressively gotten worse as the season's gone on. More hard contact allowed. The swing strike rate has also gone down as the season's gone on. His strikeout rate has gone down. The runs have gone up. And then he's going up against the Cardinals team that does not really strike out much at all. They hit left-handed pitching really well because it's such a right-hand dominant lineup. You got guys like Nolan Arenado and Paul Goldschmidt in the middle of the order. These have historically been two of the best hitters in baseball against left-handed pitching over the last, 6, 7, 8 years, something along that time span. So I think this is a really dangerous matchup for Lauer. And I still think he has enough name appeal because of how well he's pitched at the start of the season that people aren't going to stack up the Cardinals very frequently. And I think people should be stacking the Cardinals in this spot.
They're my favorite team. Again, it's weird to say on this slate. It's not like I'm going to be just destroying the drum. I'm destroying the drum though for Paul Goldschmidt. Like I will just say it right from the get-go. Paul Goldschmidt against lefties, just play him. I don't understand what the field's doing. There's been so many times against lefties. He was like sub 5% in 95 plus degree weather. It's just been very strange to me. Obviously, this is a dome game on the road in Milwaukee, but if his back's fine, he's going to just smash lefties every single time that he's up there, having a phenomenal season, a resurgent season coming off of his first year in St. Louis. And, he had streaks where we saw the form. We're seeing it constantly through and through this season from Paul Goldschmidt. Just I'm in love with watching him at the plate, and just a guy that I want to get to a whole lot as a one-off as well with this St. Louis stack. So I'm going to be just banging the drum for him. Rest of the board for me, San Francisco, we've talked about a million times. What do you think about Detroit, considering they've got massive positive leverage? And in terms of stack score, fourth best in the top stacks tool here today for DraftKings purposes, going up against Michael Waka Waka. Not a guy that you or I like, or most people don't like, but I just feel like this Detroit team with Riley Green, lefty going up there now, Javier Baez, Harold Castro, even a 561 expected slugging. I can get to some Tigers here completely unknown. What about you?
So Waka, he's not pitched nearly as well as his 2.28 ERA suggests. His underlying numbers 4.24 expected ERA, 3.97 FIP. But I think we have to look at why the Tigers are positively leveraged, and it's just because of how cheap they are. And we have the update to the top stacks tool where it includes both the pricing and the top stack odds. I just don't know that I need that much salary savings today because the Tigers, they only have 3.9% ownership, 4.7% chance to be a top stack. So based on that, they're maybe a little bit under-owned, and they also have a really high value score. But what am I going to do with that salary? Right? Like Otani's relatively cheap today. The other pitchers that you and I like for contrarian purposes, Skubal, relatively cheap. Other guys, George Kirby, Jordan Montgomery, also relatively cheap. So I just don't think this is the best slate where we need to go digging this deep for salary savings. And if you take some of the pricing out of the mix, Detroit just kind of looks more fairly leveraged than being an under-owned team.
Okay. I don't completely hit. I'm just going to shout out Riley Green because that's who I really want to be playing. Javi Baez destroyed a slate yesterday. Sometimes you'll see some more ownership on the other side, but considering O'Neal Cruz continues to be sub 3K, and I don't know, batting leadoff, seems like he's going to be awfully popular. I want to stop over here quick. Are you looking at this weather in Baltimore? Is there anything else that you're pulling out of this? Because I still feel pretty good about this game. If something bad happens, I apologize ahead of time, but as it stands right now, Baltimore is a team that we have really, really popular. And I think with the weather, it might end up not that. And going up against Patrick Corbin, we all know what Greg and I think of Patrick Corbin, and it is not very much in 2022. How are you handling Baltimore in this weather spot?
Yeah, so I think you bring up a good point, is how much is the weather going to impact their ownership? Because I don't think the weather is massively concerning looking at the weather report right now. If it does rain, it looks like it's going to be in the last couple innings of the game, and that would probably lead to an early finish, because for the first couple hours of the game, there's 0% chance of rain. Then you get into later innings and it's a 50% chance of rain, 70% chance. And then they're just screwed once the rain starts, because then it's 100% chance of rain the rest of the night. But I don't think it's at risk at the beginning of the game. And it's not enough of a risk at the end of the game to where I'm going to really downgrade the Baltimore Orioles. So I was underweight to them just for ownership reasons. But if we're going to find out that the ownership dips, which does look like it happened, I don't know if you looked at the most recent ownership update, but it's come down a little bit, not a crazy amount, but I don't know. Let's ask Chad. Are you guys not playing the Baltimore Orioles because of the weather? Because the reason I didn't love the Orioles coming into this show was because of the ownership, but that started to go down. So now I find the Orioles pretty fine to get to.
Yeah, they're around sub 9% here. News God has spoken. Play the Baltimore game. My guy, News God El Negro Loco in the chat. Always watching, always paying attention. Look at the baby. Look at the baby. God, that's a good movie. But anyway, News God, he's good people. Appreciate you. Jorge Alfaro going yard. Doesn't matter, because if you didn't have Alejandro Kirk in the first game, it didn't really matter. Pretty insane performance for them. How bad is Lucas Giolito this year?
He's been not great, and it seemingly keeps getting worse for him. Obviously, this wasn't a great spot against the Toronto Blue Jays this afternoon, but he got his ass kicked again. And let's see, I assume that brought his ERA and his expected ERA over 5 for the season. I didn't look at his final stat line.
Not great, Bob. Not great.
Yeah, let's see. So he finished with, I'm pretty sure he gave up 7 runs in 3 innings. Let's see, where did it end up? There's a lot of baseball games today. All right, here we go. All right, so it was 7 runs in 5 innings. Yeah, brought his ERA up to 5.4. His expected ERA coming into the game was 4.83. It's probably like 5.2 now. Yeah, I mean, we've gotten to a point where Lucas Giolito went from, do you remember him when he first broke into the league? It was stacking against him was free money in DFS.
Yeah,
remember those
fun.
days?
Yeah, it was fun. Well,
every time Giolito pitched, he just stacked against him. He walked everybody, didn't generate strikeouts, gave up a bunch of home runs. And then he got really good really quickly. He was in the Cy Young mix. Every time he pitched, you wanted to play him in DFS. And now it looks like we're kind of back to free money stacking against Giolito with his over 20% home run to fly ball rate and his non-existent ground ball rate. So whatever's wrong with Giolito, it's not been pretty.
It was like when Tyler Glasnow came up and it was like, oh, he's just walking the farm. And then he fixed that real quick. And then last year they got rid of sticky substance. He said that was the reason his UCL, or he had Tommy John, I believe, didn't he? He said he got hurt because of the sticky substance. He couldn't hold on to the ball. Haven't seen that guy in a hot second. Tampa Bay, Shane Baz, Shane McClanahan, Jeffrey Springs. I mean, look at that rotation. If you had Glasnow in the middle of that damn thing.
Yeah. And so I assume he doesn't pitch this year, but maybe comes back next year, right? Because he got hurt in the middle of last season. It wasn't at the start.
Yeah, it was right when the sticky stuff ban happened, because he said he couldn't grip the ball the same way and he got hurt.
Yeah, he was trying to, which I thought was a really legitimate gripe that the pitchers had, which was if it wasn't necessarily that he couldn't grip the baseball, but it was that he had to change his grips on the baseball, which then changed his arm action. And now all of a sudden these pitchers are just making crazy changes on the fly while throwing somebody like Tyler Glasnow 100 miles per hour. So you got these guys changing their arm angle, changing where their fingers are placed on the baseball, and it's just putting a strain on their arm that they weren't used to. So I don't know what the final numbers ended up being on pitcher injuries last year, but I do know, or I remember reading at least at one point in the season, that the month after the change came into place with the sticky substance stuff, pitcher injuries did spike.
Doesn't surprise me. Jake Swales brings up a great point. Don't forget Patino. Patino might be the best out of all of them outside of McClanahan. That guy coming from San Diego, the prized possession of the Blake Snell trade, he was filthy.
And he's hurt also.
I know, that's what I'm saying. Yeah, I forgot that he's been out too. I mean, that is just an absurd amount of arms that they've got in-house in Tampa.
I do remember whichever start it was he got hurt in. He was my most rostered pitcher on that slate. And he threw like 3 pitches. And actually, yeah, this was his only outing of the year. He came out, he got 2 outs. He allowed a single. He got hurt on the single, came out of the game. The run came around to score. That's all we've seen of him this year.
That's not fun.
No, that was a bad day.
That's bad days. You know what are good days? When you head to oddshopper.com, head to oddshopper right now. You've got 15 minutes before the slate starts. If you're in a legalized state, check out all of our BetMGM offers that we have. Check out our FanDuel, DraftKings, all of those great offers. Utilize every single sportsbook promotion that you possibly can, and go over to OddsShopper and go scoop some money with some MLB bets every single day. Expected ROI, expected win percentage, everything you could possibly want available to you over at OddsShopper. I'm trying to log on here right now, but I'm looking at some MLB bets for today. It's going to be a lot of fun. Juan Yepez, 45% expected ROI. Totally makes sense to me at plus 590. That seems like an advantageous number to be getting to. Greg, he's doing his betting VODs every single day. I'm doing my prize picks VODs every single day. Even in non-legal sports or non-legalized states like California, you can use the information on this page to help you win money in strikeout props, in total home runs. Just because the NBA is over does not mean that there aren't a ton of ways to make money over at sportsbooks. Greg, have you looked at the board today? Anything stand out to you from a sports betting aspect for today?
Yeah, so I'm pulling this up right now to see what it is that has changed from earlier, because I do record my video earlier, but the numbers usually end up changing. And also, whatever the best bets are early in the day, they almost always get steamed. So something I noticed right now, earlier in the day, Sonny Gray strikeout prop was 3.5, which was absurdly low. Now it's up to 4.5. I think the over is still playable because we're getting plus money on the over, but obviously 4.5 is a much different outlook than 3.5. 3.5 to me, that was a nearly free money bet. Now watch Sonny Gray get hurt 2 batters into the game, but it was a really bad line. Like you mentioned, Juan Yepez, we have projected with a 21% chance to hit a homer, and he's plus 590 over on FanDuel. So that's a really favorable outlook. Another guy who I'm going to be chasing, I think, for a considerable amount of time because his numbers have been off for a little bit, Juan Soto, plus 650 to homer. I understand that the matchup for him in Baltimore is not necessarily ideal because we have some of the weather concerns and whatnot, but at the same time, too, this is Tyler Wells, who's on the mound for Baltimore. While he's not a bad pitcher, he doesn't generate strikeouts. He also allows a lot of fly balls. I still think Juan Soto is one of the best hitters in baseball, despite his slow start to the season. If books are going to keep posting lines of him plus 600 to homer, plus 650 to homer, I think we come out ahead if we just blindly bet that number every day.
I love that. Juan Soto is a very good. Do not kid yourself. Juan Soto is one of the best hitters in baseball. We have a good enough track record of him the last couple of years. Could it just be he's on a terrible team with no protection in front of him? I think that is more than possible.
By the way, you had, I don't know if this is true, but Guy Will Gamble said that before, when you're doing the read, you said that you play non-legal sports. I don't, if that was, can we get some speculation from chat? What non-legal sports does Eric partake in?
Cockfighting.
Which kind?
Tyler doesn't know what to do. Kill the stream. Or the stream is part of the cockfighting.
Yeah. By the way, what he means for people who aren't clear is that Prize Picks has player props, but it's considered DFS, which you could go sign up there, because it seems people are confused. But I want to know. I really want to know what it is that Eric. What illegal sports is Eric playing? Yeah.
Here come the sex bots. Yeah, no, that's absolutely what's coming in next. Oh man, this is a fun job, but also that was a weird moment. I apologize if I said that weirdly, but it's not the weirdest thing I've ever said on these streets. Let's be serious.
No.
Cool.
No, not even close. And it wasn't something with any kind of innuendo, malice, nothing. I mean, it was just a slip of the tongue, which is also involved in one of the illegal sports Eric plays in.
Let's go position by position and round out the show like we always do, my friend. I will say, you will not believe how much Baltimore exposure I have now based off our last update. Things have changed. And plus, I'm insinuating that some people are worried about the weather. I'm just going to play a ton of Baltimore today against Patrick Corbin if they really, really want to get away from it. So that seems fun to me. But starting at the catcher position, Adley Rutschman, Gary Sanchez, Robinson Chirinos. Those are my three. How about yourself?
Let's see. So I'll go back to my lineups, and I also like getting to Adley Rutschman. I think he makes a lot of sense. One thing that I can't load up on the Cardinals catcher here. So yesterday, just across the board, all my top owned players are mostly Cardinals, but Andrew Knizer, not somebody I want to get a whole bunch of exposure to. So I'm a little spread out.
Knizer Soze.
Yeah, exactly. No interest in him for those exact same reasons. But Willem Contreras, I think, makes sense. Adley Rutschman. I'm pretty spread out at catcher.
Okay. Yeah. Rutschman, go yard. Continue being the prospect that you were heralded to be. Mountcastle, Mancini, Araz. But they do not match up with my boy, Paul Goldschmidt, by far my highest owned first baseman. How about yourself?
Paul Goldschmidt.
It's just such a smash spot. Yeah. Let's just go. Going to second base, Araz continues to be over there. Nolan Gorman up on the board. Yeah, lefties. I don't care. No discrimination here. Squirrel, Trevor Story, and Richie Martin. Talk to me. Who are you getting to at second?
Nolan Gorman, Luis Arise. So Gorman yesterday hit a pair of homers. He's been in a little bit of a funk as of late, but all his hits have been homers. So that's positive. I think in his last, 6 games, he only has 3 hits. He has 4 hits, but 3 of them are homers or something like that. But Gorman, hard to not like the upside of him. I'm not too concerned about the left-on-left matchup, especially because if I'm stacking the Cardinals pretty heavily, I'm not anticipating Eric Lauer going deep into the game. So my 2 most rostered second basemen are Gorman and Arise.
All right. We head on over to, where are we going to?
Third base.
Just lost my spot. Thank you. Third base. There's this guy, Jose Ramirez. And if you have money, you just pay for him as a one-off. Nolan Arenado against any lefty. Please get better. And then Tyler Nevin, again, Baltimore, just jumping up to the board on that last update. How about yourself?
Yeah, I really like getting to Nolan Arenado at third base. Hits left-handed pitching really well, going up against a lefty who struggled as of late in Eric Lauer. So Arenado for me, and I think that he's not going to be as popular as he should be.
No, he's not. Heading to shortstop. This is where I think you've just basically said O'Neal Cruz the last 2 days and then moved on with your life. That's worked out well. Are you doing the same thing tonight?
Yep. He's also batting leadoff today, which
that's absurd.
Maybe gets him an extra at bat. At the very least, he's going to be hitting in front of hitters that are better. So that gives him a better chance of scoring runs as opposed to before when he's sitting towards the bottom of the order and just had terrible hitters behind him. But yeah, we've seen really good things out of O'Neal Cruz. He's kind of like the Aaron Judge of shortstops, which kind of ironic too, that he's called a shortstop when he's 6'7", just a gigantic shortstop. They're gonna have to rename the position for O'Neal Cruz, but he's not priced appropriately on DraftKings or FanDuel. So I think we just keep riding him until the price gets correct.
All right. And to the outfield we go. We are going to round out our show per usual here. Getting in right in the nick of time here for 7 p.m. Eastern time for all of you to get all your lovely lineups uploaded. Double checking whether it looks good in Baltimore, by the way. News guide, you're the man. But outfield for me, Acuna. I'm just going to make that a strong play against Rodon. A lot of lineups that I don't have Rodon are going to have Acuna in them. Austin Hayes, Mancini, Santander, Kirilloff. Those are my 5 highest owned here. How about yourself, Greg? Round it out for us.
Yeah, Acuna, Taylor Ward, he's hit the ball really well this year, and he's kind of bizarrely cheap based on what we've seen from, especially considering the positive matchup against Lynch. Juan Soto, I like getting to him. It's funny, as far as the Cardinals hitters go, I like the infielders much more than the outfielders. There's not that many outfielders I get to all that much, but Dylan Carlson, Harrison Bader, they're both in my stacks, but I am getting to the infielders much more than the outfielders. All
right, guys. We have reached the end of our boarding walk. Hit that like button, subscribe button, notification bell. We had 800 strong hanging out with us throughout this show. We're talking baseball here on a Wednesday afternoon. Hopefully you enjoyed it as much as Greg and I did, and a like goes a long way for us. Thank you so much to Tyler Zander behind the virtual glass, doing an amazing job per usual. Always invested. Nice to see that he cleaned up Bruce's clean little area there too. What? It's not? Bruce is being bad. All right, never mind. Touchy subject. Greg, any final words for the people as we get out of here?
Nope, that's it. Just if you guys haven't done so already, do us a favor, like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel, and good luck tonight. All right, he's Greg. He's going to go not cockfight. I'm Eric. What I do is my business. We'll see you guys later. Don't tell me what I can't do. Bruce!